should believe in a big Australia. I make no apology for that.
I don't believe in a big Australia. I don't believe in simply hurtling down a track to a 36 million or 40 million population.
What's so wrong with a big Australia? Why do we have to think so small?
If we're already in deficit and existing infrastructure can hardly cope with current densities, how can a population increase of nearly 2 million people over the next 26 years possibly be justified?
We also have a practice throughout Australia of building our cities where our most fertile soil is, and then continuing to expand and gradually lose our most fertile soil.
G'day, my name's Nicholas Ryan and I'm here in my hometown of Camden, New South Wales. Over the past few months, Australians have been discussing the future of our country in terms of population and development. Camden is one of the fastest growing centres of Sydney, and it's here that those large-scale trends and changes are reflected on a small scale. It's my belief that as Australians, we need to learn to become more courageous and imaginative. Camden is on the very southwestern fringe of metropolitan Sydney. In fact, I live as close to Wollongong as I do to Sydney. This ever-changing town started life in about 1795, when a group of explorers set out to find a herd of cattle that had broken loose from the banks of the then very new township of Sydney. The area was first called Cow Pasture, but within a few short years, it was renamed Camden and became the birthplace of Australia's wool industry under the leadership of the MacArthur family. Wool production provided Australia with its first resource boom, well before the gold rush. Over time, Camden moved off the sheep's back and into the coal mine for its bread and butter. Following that, it became a well-known pit stop for people travelling between Sydney and Melbourne, before the Heywire was rebuilt to bypass Camden altogether. In fact, so vital was Camden up until that point, in 1979 a truck driver named Green Dog Stevens parked his truck in the middle of a road named Razorback, a few minutes' drive from the main street of Camden, calling for an end to road tax and compulsory union membership. He was soon joined by hundreds of other truckies, effectively blockading Sydney. Such dizzying heights of importance weren't to visit Camden for another 30 years, but sadly, for all the wrong reasons. In 2007, Camden Council received an application to build an Islamic school. What followed was significant public outcry by some sectors within the community. The public meetings and the placing of a pig's head on the proposed school site got Camden global news coverage from broadcasters like the BBC and Al Jazeera. In the end, the school was all too conveniently rejected on planning grounds. But for a moment, Camden became the front line for one of the most hotly contested social issues facing Western societies. Camden is in the grip of unprecedented growth. Our current population is about 53,000. But within the next 20 years it will be closer to 300,000. We're building more schools, more shops, and even the odd new church. One of the biggest new housing estates is called Oran Park Town. It used to be famous for V8 supercar racing, but now it seems that this new park equipment will stand as one of its few reminders, and a street named Peter Brock. But all of this new development comes at a price, however. Old farming land. But not to worry, we've built a monument to that too. And for good measure, just to make the place feel a little bit more fancy, we've built a Hollywood-styled sign. But with all this growth comes fears founded on historical precedent. For example, will the roads be wide enough, quick enough? This is the biggest road in and out of Camden, and every morning and afternoon it's near gridlock. I remember when this was just one lane each way, with a couple of roundabouts. In fact, people are so angry about it, it's likely our new federal Member of Parliament won almost entirely on the basis that he promised to make it wider still. Transport is such a big issue that one of the biggest selling points for the new estates is that they're only about 10 to 15 minutes drive away from a yet-to-be-built railway station that we've been promised by the New South Wales state government for about 10 years. And they've officially announced it more than 9 times, and still nothing's happened. Plus, back in the 60s, Camden ripped up its railway tracks with the promise that no man need take the train when he could drive his own car to work every day. Boy, didn't we get suckered. That said, some people enjoy the fact that we did that because inadvertently it kept the town's population small. Camden also boasts its own airport, but let's hope there aren't any plans to take that off us too. People regularly give Camden a hard time and paid out for being something of a bit of a backward-thinking hick town. And whilst that mightn't be 100% inaccurate, it did manage to jumpstart an entire continent's economy and develop an industry and product that Australia still relies on today. People rightly question Australia's place in the world and suggest that it's pretty globally insignificant. Maybe they're right, for now. But where do we want Australia to be by the end of this century? Now, it's at this point it would be really easy for me to say, look, all this development and destruction of perfectly good agricultural land needs to stop immediately. But I'm not. I do fear that Australia has made some poor decisions in building all the houses where we should have built all the farms. And I'm often sceptical of any government in this country, either state or federal, when it comes to the delivery of infrastructure on time, on budget, and on par with what is needed now, as opposed to 10 years ago. And particularly living in New South Wales, whilst we have to watch other states take money from their resource booms and our GST money from New South Welshmen to develop bigger highways and roads for smaller cities, and benefit from learning from our mistakes. But the roads have been built and the land has been sold. We need to stop fighting against change that has already happened. We need to stop being scared of a bigger Camden, Sydney, or Australia. If we have a big vision and meet that vision with sufficient planning and spending, we can make it work, as opposed to thinking small and building big. I don't think the problem is a bigger Australia, or even thinking too big. The problem has been for too long we've thought too small. It's as though Australia has been looking for a 2-bedroom apartment when it intends to invite at least a dozen or more people to come and live here, and then complains a year later that the infrastructure is inadequate. I fully understand that our 2 biggest problems is finding enough water and good soil, but I'm also convinced it's having enough guts and imagination to solve those problems. We live in a country the size of America, and yet have less people than the state of California. Arnold Schwarzenegger takes care of more people than our Prime Minister. We are twice the size of Europe, 60 times bigger than England, but we have the attitude of something akin to the Cook Islands. This country can help solve one of the single biggest challenges facing humanity in this century, dirt and water, and in the process help ourselves. It's amazing to think that with all our incredible technologies, now in our globalized, biotech, mechanized, war-fighting, information age, it's all going to come down to dirt and water. I don't know about you, but I'm embarrassed and frustrated at times to think that we've got a line of leaders that are trying to set our expectations and dreams as low as possible, often because of their own incompetence and lack of foresight. Are we seriously meant to move forward by standing still, or have a real action by moving backwards? Just like Camden has something to teach Australia, Australia may one day have something to teach the world, if it doesn't already.